Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this exciting panel discussion. As Alan mentioned, I'm Esra Kasapoglu, and I am the Director of AI and Data Economy at Innovate UK, UK's national innovation agency. So I'm privileged to be moderating this panel session this morning, especially on a Thursday morning when the sun is shining and a buzz is out in the corridor and everywhere, and very, very, very exciting times. So we will be discussing, as Alan mentioned, the transformation of place through digital infrastructure and planning. And we will be diving into the opportunities stemming from digital infrastructure and digital planning to transform our places, lives, the ways we live and work. And how can we will also discuss how can we build environment sector to leverage standardized digital infrastructure and data-driven decisions to optimize planning and placemaking. So we have an excellent group of panelists today here with us who will share their insights and experiences. And they are representatives from local government, local authorities, and national government, industry, and European Space Agency. Let me now, it's the time to introduce them to you. Can I first ask for Andrew to come on the stage? Andrew Collinge, please, from Smart Cities for Europe, Director at Jacobs. And next, we are going to be joined by Bridget Wilkins, Head of Adoption, Engagement, Innovation at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Our third panelist is Colin Birchenall, Chief Technology Officer of the Digital Office for Scottish Local Government and the Chief Digital Officer for Glasgow City Council. Then we have joined by Rita Rinaldo, Head of Applications, Projects and Studies Division at the European Space Agency. And last, but certainly not least, we have Theo, Blackwell, MBE, joining us from Government Digital Services. Welcome, welcome. So thank you all for being here. We'll be starting with the discussion with some questions. After we have gone through them, we'll open the floor for questions from you, from the audience, and from our joiners online. And so please feel free to think of any questions you might have during the discussion, and we'll get to as many as we can towards the end. Now, to kick things off and get your thoughts on, let me start with the question that I would like to ask to the panel. What are the key opportunities offered by digital infrastructure and planning to transform our places? Shall we start with Theo and move around, if that's okay with you?
Thank you very much. So the key opportunities afforded by digital for infrastructure are, in my opinion, around better places, growth, easier life for citizens. So in my normal life, I'm Chief Digital Officer for London, but I'm on a 3-month secondment to Government Digital Service at the moment. And I think there's a really important role for central government here, because what we're seeing at the moment is a real reshaping of the capabilities of central government in Whitehall in the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. So Government Digital Service, which most people will kind of connect with through the sort of the services that you get on gov.uk, has an expanded remit. It brings in geospatial commission, so a whole load of place data. It brings in the National Data Library, which will begin to connect up those data sets right across the country for public service users as well as academics. And it brings in the AI incubator. So that's a team of about 40 or 50 engineers who are creating some really, really strong alphas on using AI. And I think further down the line, we'll have a real connection with what I see as a really rich potential pipeline of use cases that are in local government at the moment, but as we all know from local government, they're locked in local government. They're locked in departments and councils across the country. So the real challenge for us to get that kind of benefit over easier lives and growth and the benefit of those technologies is to create a much stronger connective tissue here between local, central, business agencies such as the Catapult, so that we can do scale better.
Fantastic. Andrew.
Hi. I should get a new jacket, shouldn't I? It's the same one picture behind me. I mean, building on what Theo was saying, I think I look at this in terms of systems, which is sort of new. I'm in a new world. I used to work in government, and now I'm in a great big engineering consultancy. And then people terms and economic terms. And just to deal with systems first, I mean, Jacobs does digital master planning, and I think there's a question about how strong a place there is for that in the work of regional government and local government more generally. But I think if we are to optimise and create the communities of the future, and Theo said what those communities should look like, then there's a place for it, and that's about digital and data, it's about evidence-based design and running of place, and it's also about the operational technology as well that will support those things, the pipes, the ducts, the energy that you need to make things happen. But what's making things happen about in systems terms, we have a whole load of sort of connected problems or policy areas at the moment, and that runs from energy, land use, housing, public health, mobility, the list goes on. And at the moment, we still have sort of segregated data. So we've got connected problems, but segregated data. And if we are to decarbonise social housing, decarbonise fleet, generally make sure that assets are fit for the things that humans should be able to do with them, with the help of digital in the 21st century, then we need to get to the point where we have integrated digital infrastructure that's supported by data. In terms of people, we live in a world where digital mediates practically everything that we do. And that means that we need ubiquitous connectivity. And Theo's done a lot of work in that down the years in London. And we ourselves work with, in areas like the West of England Combined Authority, which has a whole different set of problems, some common ones, in achieving the kinds of things that we should do with digital connectivity, which again is just about economic participation, the building of digitised 21st century public services currently locked in local authorities, and making sure that those scale. And then there's economic terms as well, on my last point, which is, we need AI-ready data centres, or we need data centres more generally. And there's a great big problem there, power. And we've got a great big power queue in this country, and we need to make sure that we are sort of able to make some quite difficult choices. And I think this is my last point. There's lots to be positive about. I've just come back from the Middle East. Things happen there in a certain way. I come here and I'm actually re-inspired by the work that public servants are doing locally and nationally. There's real substance to the work. But there are real difficult political choices. And if you are a mayor or a council leader or a chief exec sitting in a public authority at the moment, and you're thinking, how do I contribute to the building of 1.5 million homes by the end of this parliament? How do I sort of build economic and digital economy growth through the data centres? Power. We can't do both of those things. You can't build 40,000 homes and have an AI-ready data centre, however much you pretend about reuse of waste heat from that data centre. We need some good solutioning happening.
Totally. We have quite few great ambitions.
Yeah. I can't believe
how could we practically achieve that?
What kind of word was that?
I'll use it later.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Colin, how about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you.
Subject?
I mean, in basic terms, digital innovation in planning and digital infrastructure has potential to improve social, economic and environmental outcomes. And the way you can achieve that is by using digital to improve the decision making about planning, so we make more informed choices as we're planning places. And from a service delivery perspective, it's about enabling us to reimagine and rethink how we deliver services so that they're more place-based, targeted, preventative, than they have been, using real-time data and AI. And then what's interesting, though, is the trajectory from getting where we are now to that point is an opportunity for innovation, opportunity to work across the public sector, third sector, academic sector, and industry.
Thank you. Bridget.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. I think in response to the question, we're sitting here at an incredible moment of change, challenge, and opportunity when it comes to trying to answer this question collectively across this panel and this room here today. For us as a program, one of the key questions we're asking is how do we bring this vision of 1.5 million homes to life? And where can we work with different stakeholders to actually bring that to life for communities, for existing and new residents, for investors, developers, and many of us who wear different hats across the wonderful built environment. But of course, recognising that vision is often stuck in an analogue system, to your point, Theo, in a broken marketplace and in a broken process when it comes to making planning decisions. So of the 450,000 planning applications that were submitted in 2022, 50% were invalid the moment they were submitted. 50% failure rate the day they are submitted to local planning authorities. So you're instantly putting a capacity burden onto local authorities who already are pretty thin on the ground trying to bring many of these visions to life. So for us as a program, we've been looking at which parts of this system do we intervene in, or do we make choices that others are going to work with us or others will lead the way in how we start to, I think, build the foundations for what a modern system could look like, how we can kind of catalyse and spark innovation, but also, I think work with brilliant people across central and local government to make some of those more crunchy choices around the trade-offs, around who owns some really interesting opportunity areas when it comes to digital infrastructure, areas like spatial planning, evidence-based for local plans, which potentially would spin up in strategic planning. These are really big topical issues that could also help us deliver, towards our 1.5 million homes target. So it's an exciting time, and we're here to listen, learn, and collaborate along the way.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rita.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure of being here today. I'm not saying I'm coming from space, but representing the European Space Agency. One may wonder what has a space to do with cities and addressing the challenges that we've heard, acknowledging that 70% of the population by 2050 will live in cities, so the importance of it. Well, it's many years. We work together with City, really working cross sectors, because space is part of the digital economy, and space is actually enabling most of the applications you have today, because and many of the ones that we want to develop tomorrow. Because when we talk about data analytics. So data are typically to be georeferenced. So you need to know the position of the data, the timing of the data. So all what has to do with IoTs and infrastructure and construction, the built environment, but also the vegetation, the land use. This has to do with space, has a space inside it. And through satellite data, we can monitor environmental impact, we can monitor traffic patterns, we can see variations in the built environment that can be allowing planning better for the future, can understand what are heat areas, what are climate trends, how can we make our city more resilient, more livable, connected, more inclusive. So this is why we believe we need to work together. We have started a task force on cities. There are many UK cities, Glasgow, one of them participating, and many Europeans, one, and also internationally, because I heard the problem of scale that was raised before, and how we enable innovation in a cost-effective manner. So this is actually accessible to cities. And this is why we believe that we could build platforms that leverage on innovation across the UK, across Europe, and going internationally, so that companies can offer those digital solutions at an economy of scale that makes it affordable for cities and at the same time fosters further innovation.
Thank you. That's very insightful so far, this panel. I'm so looking forward to some more insights and perspectives on other issues that we will be discussing. So thank you all for sharing your perspectives. Now I'd like to ask each of you some more specific questions based on your area and expertise. And if I may, I'd like to start with you, Bridget, because it will nicely build on what Rita already said to us about the data, the digital working together. So with the rise of the technologies, digital and data influencing how we think, how we engage with different things, how we shape our places, what do you think as a government we need to do better in terms of data and digital planning, or what do we need to bring more into our thinking to shape these new programs going forward? You touched upon it a little bit earlier, so I would like to see what other thoughts that you might want to add.
It's such an important question. I'm sure Theo and many others have some views on it as well. From our perspective, we think the real opportunity is how we build a marketplace that can both leverage all the brilliant ideas and innovation bubbling across this country and wanting to expand and grow into this economy with existing software providers that are already embedded into local government, that are already embedded into development corporations and working with different players in the broader delivery lifecycle. And that question of how we achieve scale is quite a tricky one, right? Because which bit do we go after? But one of the areas for us as a program is looking at how we have been developing alternative software versions of modern planning software, and we're co-designing that in real time with local authorities on real planning applications. We've also been publishing planning data and creating planning data standards as well, because there's a really interesting question of interoperability in the system and how we start to bridge that gap. And then, of course, how we continue to catalyse innovation. So through our PropTech Innovation Fund, we've invested in over 70 local authorities to develop and trial new PropTech, property technology, often for the first time in their local plan making process, in their site process, in a range of stages that we know local authorities get stuck in that planning delivery lifecycle. And it's been fascinating to witness kind of this growing digital ecosystem and economy. Only a few years ago, there were probably a handful of interesting startup companies in this space that could really get into local government, because we know procurement is one of these big barriers. It still permeates. But now there's over 250 companies in the marketplace in the UK, and that number continues to grow, and we're really excited about what we can do to continue catalysing that growth. The final thing that I plug, because I'd encourage everyone to look it up, is something we've launched recently, which is called the Digital Planning Directory, and it is the one-stop shop for digital planning products to the marketplace that we're really encouraging suppliers to engage with, and we can bring local authorities into that marketplace as well to try and bridge that gap between supply and demand. We hope that's a start. That's
a fantastic start. Any of the panel members who would like to add on that point?
Certainly. I mean, I think the work that's happened at MHCLG on digital planning is important for two reasons. One is reforming and growing the digital capability of the planning system. And I know, coming from London, where we've been on a journey with the Open Data Planning, London Planning Data Hub, just how transformative that is for London as a strategic authority. What I saw on the ground is our ability to go from a system where, and a kind of overview of the planning system, which 7 or 8 years ago, if you looked at planning data, it essentially was a collection of sort of submissions from 32 planning authorities in London, some of which were submitted kind of like over the weekend, and some of which were kind of given in bulk once every 18 months. So at any one time, no one had an earthly idea of what was going on in the planning system. So our ability to actually transform that into a live feed enables a number of things, including a building of confidence that we can do more with data. So the London story was very much like, having built that, can we have greater insights into economic activity? So they spun up the High Streets Data Service, which collectively bought MasterCard data and and mobile data, so we could really see what was going on the high streets and compare the vitality of high streets, not just because they were next door to each other, but they were statistical neighbours. So a high street in Kilburn might be closer to one in South London in terms of what was going on. So in itself, great progress. But what digital planning also shows us is something that's actually far more fundamental to public service reform, because they've done such a deep dive into how data is sort of gathered, managed and used and engaged with the supplier market. It teaches us lessons of wider application to social care and other key local government services. And simply put, the current way in which IT supports the many local authority services out there is a challenge for public service reform. And we will not get to a situation where data flows and that we can derive value for it for citizens and those who serve them unless some major changes are made, that we kind of have a new North Star on what our technology mix is and stressing the importance of the flow of that data. So that's definitely something that's has to be repackaged as almost like the central delivery problem that has to be overcome by the government.
Yeah.
Go on, you go first, Colin.
I think the other opportunity from the work as well is capacity.
Yeah.
So there is the confidence building around data, but it's the increase in capacity. So when I talk about digital transformation generally, I talk about how there's a role of digital to drive productivity, your internal processes, etc. There's a role for digital to transform your customer experience, which is very relevant to planners. There's a number of transactions that planners deal with. And there's a role of digital to improve outcomes. The way we want to get is that latter one about using digital, use data to improve outcomes for our places and the people that live there. And within planning, the opportunities from digital twin and using spatial data and other real-time data sets is enormous. But how do you transition and transform into that space when you're dealing with high volumes of transactions and 50% of them are invalid? You don't have that capacity for the change. So, whilst we want to drive that vision, we need to cut that noise out of the system and allow planners to do what they dreamed of being when they chose a career in planning and just get those transactions off their desks.
Absolutely. Please.
Andrew. I'd like to make a couple of points. One about energy, which I touched on earlier, and another about some of the work that we're doing around like connected adult social care with Glasgow. And it relates to data and how it flows and how it can be used. And I listened to the chief exec of the Energy Systems Catapult yesterday, who was pretty frank in saying that the way in which data is shared across such a crucial part of our economy is not as it should be. And I'm being, I think, kind with my words there. And I think industry is probably looking at NESO and the sort of regional energy strategic plans. Then there's the Energy Systems Catapult itself, which supports through the local area energy plans. So there's lots of these efforts going on to collect data and use it. And it was he himself, I'm using his words directly here, was talking about a culture of data hoarding. That does still exist, and there are reasons for that. Some of those are commercial, some of those are cultural. But we have to get to a stage where these things just make such good economic and social sense that we do them. And key to that is monetization or valorization. And they're dirty words for government, or have been treated as such. They're not. It's just a way of measuring value. And that's about how you use the data. It's not about selling the stuff. So that's something that I think government needs to get to grips with. And my second point was about adult social care and some of the work that we have been doing with Glasgow through the DSIT 5G Innovation Regions work. It's been a really pleasurable experience for us in Jacobs working with colleagues in Glasgow City Council, and again, connecting up, and you can course correct me if I get some of this wrong here, Colin.
Sure you will.
Around housing associations, adult social care providers in public and private sectors. And there we are trying to use IoT technologies from a plurality of providers. And I think one of the things that we're finding is they come along, and because there is commercial advantage in keeping like a dashboard or an app on the end of their particular piece of IoT, then the integration is not there, or the possibility for integration is not there. And that then means that the possibilities for leveraging value out of that, for the individual is sitting in their home who wants to stay warm, stay safe, stay healthy, etc. Very human-based outcomes. You know, that's why we need this dull stuff called standards work, because out of that will flow the business models. You know, some of the investigatory work that we do shows that there are good returns in terms of that stuff we call cost-benefit analysis. But we can't scale until we tackle some of those issues around standards, around IoT, and around monetization.
Around the data especially, we have huge challenges, but there are great opportunities.
I can be very dull about data. Suggest we move on.
I would like to bring in Rita a little bit on that, and I would like to find a little bit more about what space sector is doing to meet these data challenges, to improve our cities, and what more could the space agency do, what more could we do, what more we need to think more about.
Yes, I think we started discussing about digital twins and how we can effectively use data and make sure that the solutions that we are supporting are really adopted. So I think this is really a crucial point. We have supported about 70 projects around the topic of smart cities, and our ambition, our intention has always been to allow during the project really a pilot where the solution is tested together, tested by the cities, by the people that we are supposed to use it in the future, and is customized and optimized so that we try to de-risk it and to make sure that this is really up to the ambition, up to the requirements that are put forward. Because, of course, we can talk about, in general, about data, but there has a couple of good examples made, and there are more. And every time the requirements can be specific, so that we have a common basis, a common platform, but then additional data and additional machine learning algorithm or AI that I tailor to the solution. And I make a couple of examples. For example, we had some very successful projects, for example, in Germany, that were using space data together with other data to plan vegetation in a city, to monitor the growth of the vegetation, to define and contour heat areas, cold area corridors, and we know that with the climate change, heat areas, flooding more on the south of Europe are really important factors. And this is where a wealth of data is needed, from meteorological data, satellite Earth observation data, sensor data from the city. And this is, for example, one use case, but there are more. If we think about transport networks and mobility, there are CCTV data, there are fixed sensor data that are typically used to inform decisions, but there are many more data. We all have a smartphone, so there are a lot of floating data that can be used for location-based services. In the future, we will have connected cars, also a wealth of data from vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to vehicle communication. So that's where also GNSS network, alternative position, navigation, and timing solution come into play together with connectivity networks. So there are so many examples that one could make, but there are a lot of new use cases that we can address. And for this year, we have targeted specifically 3 initiatives. One that is around intermodal transport, so how to plan effectively intermodal transport in cities. The second is about sustainable, connected and livable cities, so all about urban sustainability, planning the built environment, but also walkability in cities, environmental impact. And the third is about resilient cities, so how we make sure that our cities and infrastructure in city is planned in a resilient manner, how we make most use of ground data and space data as enabler to address those challenges.
Fantastic. I'm just conscious of the time, and I would like to open the floor to the questions from the audience and from our online participation as well. There's a question here from Andrew.
Andrew Ross from Global Garden. How do you propose incorporating land use framework in AI for nature-based solutions on a catchment system scale, referring, for instance, to the flood risk, where we know the value of the assets at risk is 4.4 trillion. It's a system scale on a catchment scale that MHCLG need to answer, and where to build these 1.5 million homes.
Should I try and answer that? This is where I say I can't speak for the entire department, of course. Planning innovation, come to me. Everything else, colleagues. I think what you're, without trying to answer the detail, which I can't answer, I think what you're also speaking to here is the complexity of land use and how we make decisions between energy, food, water and housing. Like that was the Geospatial Commission's Finding Common Ground report published 2 years ago. They called that out and they said something needs to change. Someone needs to own this literal and digital space. And that hasn't happened yet. And I hope that Theo's work and other work happening in kind of the Centre of Digital Government Reform can pick up this challenge and opportunity, because it's kind of where it's all going to come together, right? And it could be really exciting. So I haven't answered your question, but I'm totally up for solving it with many others. Because I think it speaks to this moment in time between devolution, strategic planning, digital reform, and local plan delivery to also get to 1.5 million, but to do it in a way that's nature-based in the backdrop of BNG coming out now 12 months down the track. So there's a nice kind of current there that hopefully will bring different agendas together at different levels of government to find a solution.
Because you can't build those homes across the Oxford to Cambridge Arc on a floodplain.
Exactly, yeah.
Where's a green bond to do that?
Where are the green bonds that could be financing this?
Yeah.
It's a really worthy challenge and opportunity for us, and we are going to be supporting Bridget and every single other leader who would like to solve that problem.
Yeah, and perhaps that's another panel discussion and another discussion, because it's like, how do we get into the real challenges here at a systemic issue for the funding of it that can also unlock investment and growth?
And Theo and Andrew, do you have, or Colin and Rita, do you have any more to add to that discussion?
I mean, not on the detail. I mean, certainly I make the point that the confidence building of creating a live data feed on planning in London also enabled not just to build out in the area of local economic activity, but also for the first time, a city the size of London was able to look at its available land use for by having essentially a digital call for sites. It's called Land for London, which you can see on their website. And I just say that, you know, the confidence in creating something is something really, really special with the digital team. It makes you then think about the next step. So we go from kind of, yeah, it's great, we've brought all the data together, and then it brings you into purpose. And one of the big challenges with local authorities, I think historically, and it played itself out during the pandemic, is that when you kind of approach data, it's like bring it all into one place and then the kind of answer will reveal itself. As opposed to thinking about data is much more like, you know, there are a set of methods that you've got to set out. You've got to start with the problem first and create a data service from that point onwards. And so I see the kind of, you know, we will see increasing value as professionals and data people sort of wrangle these questions together and create really high quality data services. And we're beginning to see that now, and I'm sort of tremendously excited over the next sort of 18 months, 2 years, when these things will become much more, you know, kind of mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, you know, there's an AI action plan, and in it there's, like, one of the headline recommendations is to pursue 5 high-value data sets. And I just really hope that those are focused on something of significant value. And
Right.
actually, why 5? Because, as Theo says, it's about finding the point at which value is achieved. Which problem are you particularly tackling? And back to my earlier point, we have a load of connected problems.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I'm obviously going to say this, engage with industry, Theo. We have a load of ideas about how we can use data to make sure that we, make
Thank you.
communities better.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of the time, and we just ran out of it. And I would like the audience to please come forward. We are all here to answer your questions. And thank you for your attention. Thank you. And I'd like to use this opportunity to thank to my panel for their thought-provoking, inspiring perspectives and really establishing the way forward for us. Thank you. And round of applause, please, for my panel, for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.